Well, one of my good friends right here, Dr. Josh Axe, always great to connect. And we're talking about one of our favorite topics, cellular longevity, mitochondrial health, best foods, best supplements. So let's get this started. When you think about cellular longevity, what comes to your mind?
Well, our body's made up of around 37 trillion cells, and we need to keep all of these cells healthy if we're going to heal. One of the things a lot of people don't realize is that almost every year, a good majority of our body's new, or at least every 7 years, 70% of our body's new. And certain organs, like our liver, is completely new every single year. And so there are a lot of people today who are struggling with health issues because their cells aren't regenerating and healing properly. And basically, their organs are aging too quickly. And here's what I mean. There's a study done at Stanford, and one of the things they found is that most people have one organ system or organ that's aging much faster than their other organ systems, or those cells in that particular organ are older than other organs. And this is how we can have, I think about, a lot of men who might die of a heart attack in their 60s. And it's like some of these men you look at on the outside, you think, wow, that person's incredibly fit and healthy. They might have the muscles of a 35-year-old, but the heart of a 95-year-old. And so they end up having a heart attack early and passing away. And so when I think of cellular longevity, it's very much going and looking at how do we lengthen the lifespan of your entire body, but also look at for individuals who are struggling with health issues. How do we go and create new tissues and help regenerate those tissues and those organs to help you heal? And that organ in the study that I was referencing, Dr. Dave, they found that if somebody had certain heart markers that were high, for instance, just something like high blood pressure, they had a 250% increased risk of dying from heart disease. Also, they found, generally speaking, that there are markers that you can look at that basically demonstrate and show that this organ system is older than some of the other organs or tissues within an individual's body. And there's some thought in the scientific community that in a way, almost all disease is an organ being overaged or aging too quickly. And most of us have probably seen this, Dr. Dave. I know that you have. I mean, we've all seen people that were in their 40s and they might have looked like they were in their 60s. I'm thinking about smokers, for example. You ever seen somebody that
Yeah.
smoked for
Oh,
years and
yeah.
years? I mean, they look 20, 30 years older than their actual age. But we've also seen people like RFK Jr. is probably an example of
Yeah.
this, or some other people today. They actually look 20 years younger than their actual age. And so what we really want to be able to do is work on getting our cells younger. And a lot of that starts with the cell membrane and the mitochondria. And and by the way, I know you know this because you've written so many fantastic articles on this. But as we age, our cell membranes can become rigid and hard, and basically there becomes a lack of exchange of everything from antioxidants to vitamins to minerals to other things that go in and out of the cell, and so it sort of creates this swamp-like cell. And so we want to help create a more fluid and mobile and just think about, like, when you're youthful, you're more mobile, flexible. It's like you're bouncy a little bit, right?
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
versus when you get older, everything gets sort of stiffened up, including our arterial walls and our cell membranes. So we want to, and the great news is there's things we can do to make our cell membranes more flexible and also help re-energize our mitochondria, which we have thousands of in our cells, and they're sort of what create energy for our cells and then our organs and for our entire body. And so when we're talking about cellular longevity, if you want to live to be, in your 90s and 100s and beyond, and here's the big thing, Dave, I did a post on Instagram recently, and I put my top 12 longevity foods on there. And or I know the way I worded it was your top 10 foods to live to be over 100. And the comment I got fairly frequently from several people was, I don't want to live to be 100.
Yeah.
And the reason is those people probably had a family member who had dementia, like a parent, or somebody who was very feeble in their family when they got older. And they thought, well, they feel like as if they were 90, they'd have to be feeble and they'd probably have dementia. But what if I told you that you could feel like you were very young and you can do all your hobbies, playing pickleball and playing with your grandkids and physically active, traveling to Europe, all those things when you're in your 90s. Well, then would you want to live to be 100? Well, then they would say yes,
Absolutely.
right? So that's the reality.
Yeah, 100%. Most people aren't seeing enough examples of successful aging. So they just think, and most people just think it's luck, right? And so if people
That's right.
age, if people age well, they think they just got lucky, whereas other people didn't get lucky. But there's actually a lot that we can do from our end in order to put the right inputs in and to create the right cellular environment for aging and longevity. One of those big things is obviously the food we put in our body. And of course, we spend a lot of time and energy on the food because that's something we consciously control. We control what we put in our mouth. We can't always control what we're breathing. For example, we can do things to help, but can't always control that, but we can control what we put in our mouth as far as eating. And so what are some of the best foods that you like to look at? You talked about those top 10
Yeah.
foods to live to 100. Let's go through
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, well, let me go through these categorically because there are many, and I think the categories will help. When we look at pretty much every single ancient civilization, they had foods that were prized for longevity, whether it be ancient Asian medicine like Japan and China, whether it be Native Americans, the Middle East, with foods that are talked about in the Bible. Some of the most prized foods for longevity, first category I want to hit on, are superfruits, specifically berries. Now, within the berries category, I want to lump in some things like pomegranate and figs in
Mm,
there as well. But it tends to be berries that are either black, purple, or
mm,
a vibrant red. Those tend to have those unique forms of antioxidants, resveratrol, anthocyanins, these antioxidants that lengthen our lifespans. And in Asia in particular, the most prized berry were goji berries. And goji berries are very high in vitamin C. They're very high in actually they even have lycopene. I mean, they have a lot of really unique and powerful antioxidants that help extend lifespan. And they're also known as a yin tonic, so they bring moisture to our body. They support our adrenal health. So they're even known as a very, very minor low-grade adaptogen. Schisandra berry is another one, but doing berries in particular are very good. And one of the biggest reasons why they're so powerful is they tend to be the most effective up there with certain herbs and spices in terms of reducing oxidative
mm.
stress. One of the things that causes our cells to age is ROS, and I've seen you talk about this and do graphics on this, Dr. Dave, these reactive oxygen species, and connected to age is these N-glycation products. But basically, imagine you take a bite out of an apple and that flesh starts to turn brown. Okay. So if everybody think about that, you've ever taken a bite of an apple or a pear or some sort of fruit, and over the next, sometimes even within minutes, you
Mhm.
start to see a browning of that flesh. Well, in an apple, you've got a very dark red in a lot of cases, outer coating that is loaded with the most antioxidants that keeps that flesh from aging. Think about antioxidants, especially in berries, doing the very same thing for your cells. They're keeping your cells from aging. They're protecting them from oxidative stress, from these free radicals that actually break down our DNA and shorten our telomeres and cause us to age more quickly. And so berries are one of the top foods. Now, we mentioned goji berries. That's probably my single favorite in terms of one that I do very frequently. I want to tell you on some ones that are really popular in sort of our Western world today. Blueberries, blackberries, raspberries are going to be very, very high on the list of ones we can get locally and incorporate into our diets. In South America, you've got in certain areas of the world, you've got things like acai berry, you've got maki berry.
Mhm.
These are these dark, very, very purple fruits. One that's not talked about a lot, but has some really great science behind it, or a couple, are currants. You have black and red
Yeah.
currants. These grow in the Western world. In fact, I buy a fruit jam that's like black currant, and it's great. I just spread it on when Chelsea makes sourdough bread, or we do it as almost like a little dessert. And then just a few others here, pomegranates.
Mm.
Pomegranates I would put up there with goji berries as being the absolute top superfoods for
Yeah.
longevity. Pomegranates contain, and Dave, I know you're aware of this, but they contain ellagic acid.
Mhm.
And ellagic acid, when it gets into our gut microbiome, if you've got the right gut bacteria, it's converted into something called urolithins. Now, there's one supplement brand today
Yeah.
that sells a lot of products, and it's a what's called a urolithin A product. And there's some really great clinical studies on it aging, de-aging or slowing the aging process, especially in animals. But it is probably compounds to date, one of the top we can imagine. Now, I would say it's more powerful than resveratrol was. And
Hmm.
by the way, a lot of the research on resveratrol we're finding out was falsified, and over exaggerated. But all that being said, I think it's a really powerful compound for increasing our lifespan. Now, I will say one of the things they found in this study was only about 40% of people were able to effectively convert ellagic acid to urolithin A. So not a lot of people were, less than half of people were actually able to convert it. And that's because their gut microbiomes weren't
Yeah.
healthy enough and didn't have the right bacteria in order to convert it to an active form so your body can utilize it. And so if you want to lengthen your lifespan, you want to get a lot of these superfruits, like the pomegranates, like the goji berries, like the acai. But you also want to make sure your gut microbiome's healthy, because we've heard this principle, we are what we eat. It's not totally true. You are what you digest and assimilate, and so you've got to be able to break down in your gut and turn these antioxidants and nutrients into their viable forms that then your cells can utilize, your organs can utilize to heal, rebuild,
Yeah.
cleanse, and protect itself. So berries
Yeah,
are
one of the key bacteria, they call it the keystone bacteria in the gut, Akkermansia muciniphila. It loves ellagic acid. Ellagic
yeah,
acid we find in those astringent fruits, like you talked about, pomegranate. So the kind of the almost like the bitterness, muscadine grapes, which grow naturally, they probably grow in Nashville. I
yeah,
know we have muscadine grapes in our backyard, and they're not like the most pleasurable. They're not as sweet as some of the fruit that you would naturally get at a grocery store. They have more of kind of this astringent, like almost like a bitterness flavor to them. Now they do have some sweet there, but you got to get through the bitterness first. But those are really the best for the microbiome. So you got cranberries,
yeah.
raspberries have ellagic acid, right? But yeah, it's so powerful. And that's that Akkermansia and some of these other obligate anaerobic bacteria that typically live deep in the mucosa of the gut. And when they're able to break down that ellagic acid, they produce that urolithin A, which strengthens the mitochondria and the intestinal cells, get stronger, healthier intestinal cells, less intestinal permeability, less inflammation in your body. So you're 100% right.
Yeah, it's a great point, Dr. Dave. And the muscadines, I remember talking to Jordan Rubin about this. He was like, he actually chipped his tooth on his seed because
Yeah.
you have these seeds in there too, that we have so much seedless stuff now, which it's actually better to have the seeds, but that's a whole nother. That's a whole other podcast. So, anyways, but yeah, these super fruits, again, berries tend to have the largest amounts, but again, foods like
Hmm.
pomegranates and muscadines are definitely on that list as well. Figs, you know,
Yeah.
are going to be high up there as well. In addition to these super berries, the next in line I would throw out there would be, it would be vegetables of all sorts. It could be, broccoli, sprouts are amazing. I mean, sprouts and their sulfuryl
Yeah.
compounds that act as natural detoxifiers and liver strengtheners are really powerful. So I would just say just an array of different colored vegetables, especially the green though, in terms of longevity, have a lot of benefits there as well. After we hit the green leafies, I would say, green leafies especially, and then cruciferous are going to be very, very high on the list. And then, beets are going to be up there too. I mean, beets are really big nitric oxide builders, and let me say, and maybe we could hit on this a little bit at the end, Dave, but the way that I like to break it down is there's really five main organ systems that we look at in different types of ancient medicine. And there are different foods that will create more longevity for individual organs. So, if we're talking about beets, well, that's a longevity heart food and cardiovascular system. And so it's going to help what we talked about. It's going to help those arterial walls. It's going to help blood flow. It's going to strengthen the heart. And so it may not cause as much longevity for, let's say, the digestive system as something else, but for the heart, it's going to be an amazing longevity food. We know the same thing, carrot for the eyes. It's a longevity, food for the liver as well. And so, but I would say vegetables are sort of that second category of superfoods we want to be getting in our food for longevity. And third is going to be meat, but let's highlight organ meats. Organ meats are what I would consider nature's greatest methylation supplements and B vitamin supplements. A lot of people today have concerns over this MTHFR gene variant, or the one of the two, or both variants. And I do want to point out for everybody that just because you have the gene variant or have both, that doesn't mean you can't methylate. That doesn't mean you can't create methylfolate. It just means you're not as efficient at it as other people. And also I want to point out, methylation is a lot broader than just the methylfolate cycle. I mean, there's a lot of different forms of methylation. And the way, just for everybody, I'd like to explain what methylation is if you're new to this. And this is an important part of anti-aging, by the way.
Yeah.
But imagine when you eat a food like, liver or red meat or broccoli, or let's say you have a food high in folate, okay? You eat folate, it's like your body gives you a car with no wheels, okay? So you've got a car, okay. Well, what has to happen is your body has to take folate and attach on a methyl group. So now your body can utilize it to run your organs and, to just, run your body. Well, for a lot of you, you're not putting on the methyl group. Your body is not effectively putting those tires on the car. So it's like you've just got this thing, it's just useless. It's not helping you. And so a lot of you aren't putting on the methyl groups right. The most important thing to focus on to fix that is your gut health. I know I'm going back to this again, but if your gut microbiome is very healthy, it will help you methylate a lot. And there are a lot of different nutrients that are required for methylation. And we see this time and time again, like Dave, you've seen this in the research. It started off where we were just recommending vitamin D by itself, or just recommending calcium by itself. But with all the research we have now, we realize that, well, in order to absorb calcium, you also have to have magnesium and D and probably phosphorus and a number of other things you need for proper absorption. Same thing with vitamin D, you need magnesium, you need K2, and you need fatty acids. So my point with that is everything is absorbed better in its food form with all the other nutrients that are in there. And that's what I really like about liver. I really like about organ meats. And by the way, if you don't like the taste of liver, it's okay. You can go and buy glandular or liver tablets or capsules, but they are so rich, organ specifically, like liver and kidney, in B vitamins that support methylation, and zinc, and selenium, and loads of copper, and zinc. So you're going to have most of the nutrients required for proper methylation, even the methylfolate cycle, a lot of them in organ meats. And so if you're a person that is struggling with methylation, going and doing an organ supplement or organ meats, doing a high dose of probiotics, those two things, along with your methylated B complex or whatever else you want to do, I think are just as essential to supporting your methylation cycle. So again, that was the point there, though, as we're talking about these organ meats and meats, is our muscles are also longevity organs. One of the greatest reasons, Dave, why people die prematurely is due to becoming too feeble and weak as they age, falling and breaking a hip or a bone. And then you're not able to be as active, so that hurts your cardiovascular system. So I recommend most people get about 30 to 40 grams of protein per meal. That's quite a bit of protein, but I think you do want to be getting a good amount of protein, typically from pastured organic animals, and eating nose to tail, eating some of the organ meats, which are important for supporting organs. In Chinese medicine, there's a principle, it's actually one of the primary principles of all of ancient medicine, and it says, like supports like. Eating liver supports your own liver. Eating kidney supports your own kidney. And so if you want to support those organs, getting those eating organs or just taking them as a supplement is very beneficial. Same thing, bone broth. That's pulling a lot of the nutrients from the skin and the cartilage and the in the connective tissue of animals, which is then going to support your own connective tissue. And this expands beyond this. It's like if a food looks like an organ and is a similar color or a certain color, we know that supports an organ according to Chinese medicine. So beets actually look like your blood when you cut them, right? It's blood's coming out. Ginger looks a little bit like your stomach. Onions look like your cell. Carrots, if you cut it, almost looks like it looks like an eye. Tomatoes are red and they have 4 chambers. Your heart has 4 chambers. So So anyways, all that being said, you want to get some really good quality meats. You want to get organ meats as well. And then I'll go through some of these others a little more quickly. You want to get a lot of good fatty acids, and you want to get a range of omega-3s to monounsaturated to good saturated. One of my favorites would be my absolute favorite food for fatty acids is going to be wild caught salmon or any type of fatty fish.
Mhm.
Sardines would be very high on that list as well. But omega-3s, there are, a lot of meta studies where they've compiled many studies together and found that in terms of medical studies today, omega-3 consumption might be, in terms of just the studies we have, the most efficacious for longevity, or at least heart longevity and heart health. It's going to be very, very high on the list. And so that's important to know. Getting more omega-3s. Another great source outside of wild fish would be walnuts. And by the way, what's interesting is we mentioned those filled with ellagic acid. Well, across the board, it's almost only berries that have it. Well, and then walnuts and maybe pecans too. But walnuts are one of the only foods that have it that aren't a fruit per se. And so walnuts have just tremendous benefits with their omega content. And so that would be a really good food. I mentioned like supports like. Walnuts look like a brain. It's amazing too. When you open a walnut, it actually looks like a head. You open
Yeah.
it up, there's two, it's like a left and right hemisphere of your brain. So it's an amazing food for neuro longevity if you want to do that. And then I know Dr. Dave and I are both fans of just pure extra virgin olive oil, the real stuff. There was concern, Dave, for years from people on cooking with olive oil. But I do want to mention there's been a couple more recent studies that have looked at cooking with olive oil, and they found that if it was a really high quality virgin pressed olive oil, while there was smoke coming off, the olive oil itself still kept its structure, and it actually didn't damage. I mean, it lost a few of the antioxidants in cooking, but it still kept its structure and it did not denature. And so I just wanted to
Yeah,
point
for
that
sure.
out.
Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
smoke point is what a lot of people think is the key factor, but smoke point actually it plays very little role in the quality of the oil. It's actually what we call the oxidative stability of the oil. How does it hold up under this extreme oxidative pressure? You were talking about oxidation with the
Yeah,
apple
yeah,
browning. And so a high polyphenol extra virgin olive oil. So this is ideally olives that are pressed, green olives that are
yeah,
pressed, and it's fairly fresh. Because if they wait till the olive ripens and it's black, you get more fat, you get more monounsaturated fat, which is a healthy fat. Black olives are healthy, but they're lower in these antioxidant polyphenols, these powerful polyphenols. Whereas the green olives, less fat, but more polyphenols. So it takes more of these green olives to press to produce the oil. So kind of have to get one that's more marketed for high polyphenol extra virgin olive oil, and then that's going to have the greatest oxidative stability. And so you can marinate things in it. You could
yeah.
cook in it, although I don't think it's the best oil to cook with. I think it's great
I
raw.
agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the reason I'm bringing this up though is that, like, for instance, if somebody's just cooking eggs on low heat and it's going to be in there a
Yeah.
few minutes, it's a totally
Sure.
fine
Not
oil
a
for
big
them.
deal.
Again, I prefer coconut oil or tallow or some of those
Yeah.
things if we're going to do high long
Butter. Yep.
butter. Yeah, exactly. But I do think, again, getting more extra virgin olive oil in your diet
Mm.
is great. Again, we look at the countries that are living some, have the longest lifespans. A lot of them are doing a lot of extra virgin olive oil. And then there's other great sources of monounsaturated fats, avocados as well.
Mhm.
Certain other nuts and seeds like macadamias and olives, and then seeds as well, like pumpkin seeds. Talking about a lot of great, good, nutrients in those. So getting some of those healthy fatty acids, coconut, I really like there as well. And then in terms of another just category or two, fermented foods. We look at Japan; they have the longest lifespan of anywhere in the world right now in terms of nations. And some of the foods they do a lot of fermented beans, like soybeans and chickpeas. And so we're familiar with natto, a lot of us. Miso is
Mhm.
another one. And this is a great thing to do if you're making a chicken soup or even hummus. Add a tablespoon of miso in there. You can get yellow chickpea miso is a really good one. Now, I do think if you're going through menopause, if there's a woman going through menopause, doing actual organic soybeans have a lot of benefits. They're yin tonics in that case. But if not, you can do a yellow chickpea miso, and that has these Bacillus subtilis, a really powerful, what's typically known as a soil-based probiotic, but it's a probiotic that's transient that clears out some of the
Yeah.
damaging microbes that can live in our guts. And so I do think that that's good. And then sauerkraut and kimchi and other fermented foods also can be really good. Coconut yogurt, raw, organic, grass-fed A2 yogurts and kefirs, I think, are great as well. So getting more of this good bacteria. And one of the things, David, I know I've been finding as I've really studied longevity is that the gut microbiome just keeps coming up. I mean, it just is so important for us to be able to convert the things we're actually eating into things that our body can then utilize for function and longevity and a lot of the things we've talked about here as well. And then one of the last categories I want to hit on, and there might be one more, but I think this might be the last is mushrooms. I mean, in Asia, mushrooms are known as the longevity food. I mean, it is the most prized food for longevity. And so lion's mane mushroom is known as longevity for the brain. Also, there's some benefits for the gut with that as well. Reishi mushroom is known as the most prized mushroom for longevity. It's known as the mushroom of immortality. It is an adrenal tonic that helps extend lifespan. Cordyceps is also an adrenal and let me just kind of hit on the difference here. When you look at reishi, it's known as a kidney yin tonic or an adrenal yin tonic, which means it's going to sort of help relax the stress. It's going to really bring down cortisol. Cordyceps are more known as more of a kidney yang tonic. They're going to be more stimulatory. They're going to increase sperm count and testosterone in men. They're going to be really effective at supporting issues like hypothyroidism and low body temperature in women. And so that's a really good one for sexual stamina, for vigor, for human growth hormone, for that sort of thing. Turkey tail mushroom is good for longevity, for your body fighting viral infections. Everything from Lyme to the common cold and flu, even cancer, anti-cancer properties. Shiitake and maitake are just good for cellular health and for the immune system as well. And so then chaga is anti-inflammatory. So a lot of these mushrooms have a lot of really powerful longevity benefits as well. But I think if people focus on it, just in a nutshell, hey, if you want to live a long time, the food categories you should focus on is make sure you're getting a lot of brightly colored, especially black, purple, and red berries and superfruits like pomegranate. Make sure you're getting a lot of vegetables. Make sure you're getting a lot of meat, including bone broth, muscle meat, and organ meats. Get some mushrooms in your diet, get some healthy fatty acids, get some fermented foods, get some mushrooms. If you can get those food categories in your diet, it's going to increase your lifespan.
Yeah, I think that's a great list. And of course, try to reduce as much as possible ultra processed foods that aren't grown in nature, right? Of course.
Yeah.
And so let's talk about supplements, some of your top supplements here.
Yeah, and there's going to be there might be an overlap or two with foods, but starting off, I think that vitamin D is very important. And listen, ideally, you'd get every ounce of vitamin D from the sun. When you look at, I can't remember the exact data, Dave, but I remember looking at the time spent outside 100 years ago versus today. And it's like, wow. I mean, it is just crazy. And I'm sure even 1,000 years before that, it was even a bigger rage. But, I think that everybody just needs to spend way more time outside. And this has to do with vitamin D, but it also has to do with our circadian rhythms. I'm actually writing a book right now, and it won't be released for quite some time, but I'm writing a book on longevity right now. And in the book, I really get into in ancient Asian medicine, they have a whole longevity philosophy, and it's called the three treasures. Okay, and they say you need to protect the three treasures to live a long time, and the three treasures are known as Shen, which is tied to your spiritual health, Qi, which is tied to your breath and has a lot to do with your cellular health, and then Jing, which has a lot more to do with your actual physical health, and actually Qi is actually also tied pretty heavily to mental health, and so it's sort of body, mind, spirit, focusing on health and in some of those different categories. But at the top of the list, there's a cascade effect of what happens in terms of what causes people to age. And what they have is the first on that list is your spiritual health, and also how well you are tied to, it's sort of your connection to the divine and your connection to nature. And they believe that if you are ultimately as connected to God as you possibly can, and then on the other end, as connected and living in tune with nature as you possibly can, that's what leads to ultimate longevity, both physically and eternally. And so it's a really sort of deep truth, and it's really interesting. But my point with that, and I know this is maybe seem like a far cry from vitamin D, but one of the things that we've really gotten away from is we've really messed with our circadian rhythms. And so we should wake up with the sun. And so be getting direct sunlight there in the morning. There's certain UV rays we experience then, some midday when the sun's at its highest, which is when we get the most vitamin D, which is what we focus on the most is vitamin D, that midday sun, when the UVs are the highest, and then sun in the evening, which allows those cortisol levels to start to drop, melatonin to start to go up, preparing our body to get into that deeper sleep cycle. But really, it's one of the first things that sabotages our health is not living in tune with nature and spending a lot of time outside. And the reality is it's more than just vitamin D. It really has a lot to do with cortisol and melatonin. And what we find with cortisol is cortisol tends to be the first hormone, well, that we talk about a lot. There's also hormones in your brain, hypothalamus and things like that. But it tends to be one of the first hormones that's sort of tipped off that then affects every other hormone, because they, this, it's like, okay, well, what happens when cortisol gets too high and stays too high? Well, now melatonin gets too low. Well, what else happens? Insulin goes high. Well, when insulin's high, well, now we've got an issue in everything from ghrelin to leptin to progesterone to estrogen to low testosterone to thyroid hormones. And so spending more time outdoors, like, and you'll notice this, like if you spend all day outdoors, maybe you're on the lake with family, for a trip, and you're outdoor all day boating, or you're at your kid's soccer game all day, or you just spent all day hiking or camping, you'll notice that night you will sleep far better than you've slept almost any other night. And the reason is that you've lived in tune with nature and your circadian rhythms, and sleep is when your body is healing. So I just want to say that I mentioned this is, again, a little bit of me getting off track here, but vitamin D in terms of a nutrients, it's not even a supplement you have to take. It's just you get outside as much as you possibly can. And you don't even necessarily always be having to get your full skin in the sun. Part of it is just getting some on your face and your eyes, it penetrating your nervous system, which is very supportive. But vitamin D is important. Now, listen, if you're not getting outside enough, you want to take a high quality vitamin D supplement, and you want to take that vitamin D with a meal that has good quality fats in it. That's going to support absorption, as well magnesium and vitamin K. And so anyways, consider taking those together for vitamin D. So that's probably one of my top longevity nutrients out there. Along with that, it's going to go, I would say, a lot of antioxidant powders. I do think that, I almost every morning, I've got like 5 different berry powders, Dave, that I take like a teaspoon of or tablespoon of. So I have goji berry powder. Right now I'm doing black currants. I'm doing maki berry powder. I'm doing Schisandra berry. Like, I'm adding these to my morning superfood smoothie that I do. But I would say doing more of the fruits or supplementing with some berry powders are going to be high up on the list. I think taking a liver or glandular supplement is great. My probably overall number one longevity supplement, though, is probably a high dose probiotic. A probiotic ideally that has soil-based organisms in addition to, and has maybe some prebiotics and postbiotics in it. I just really believe that, and most of these things, Dave, are us getting more in tune or trying to supplement from what we're missing in nature. If you think about the vitamin D thing, it's we're not getting enough sun. We're not getting enough tunnel sun, so we need vitamin D. Well, soil-based organisms, these are the organisms we should be getting exposed to with getting our hands in the dirt, like in our own gardens, or getting fruit from our local farmers market. And we're not getting these today. That's the reality. I was talking to Zach Bush, and he had talked about sort of the difference between how much gardening increases the diversity of our gut microbiomes. And in some cases, it was like quadrupling it. I mean, it's absolutely crazy what a difference it made if you were on a farm or spending a lot of time outdoors. And up until around 1900, around 50% of jobs had some sort of agricultural component. That's wild. And so most of us were connected to the earth, to the ground, spending more time outside. So the top two supplements we need in order to make up for our lack thereof are probiotics, soil-based tend to be, and then also getting vitamin D on that list. I think omega-3s can be a really good longevity supplement for a lot of people. Make sure that you really need to buy a good quality brand. I just want to say this: if you're buying supplements, don't buy the garbage you're going to get at your local drugstore. I mean, some of these actually take years off your life. I mean, Dave, you've seen these studies on these isolated calcium, carbonate or citrate supplements, and these are taken from limestone. Literally, this isn't like a thing we're making up. No, limestone from Tennessee. They'll grind it up. They'll pull the calcium from it. They'll put that in a supplement bottle. It looks chalky. You can even see it. And so there's studies showing that if you take that in isolation, it may increase your risk of having a stroke or a heart attack, because what will happen is that calcium will get lodged in your arterial walls and the cholesterol there, and then it will harden, or it's known as, actually, think about this, calcium. It's called calcification of your arteries. It's hardening your arteries. And so you want to be very cautious when you're buying supplements and make sure you get something that is very beneficial. Now, one nutrient in particular, Dave, I actually read an article on your site a few years ago. You did such a wonderful job of, and it was on NADH and NAD plus and NMN. There's all kinds of different variations of this, essentially niacin, this B3-ish kind of compound. And there are some good studies around that. And I actually want to say, I've taken a lot of supplements in my day and a lot of different ones. And, sometimes, Dave, we notice a difference. Sometimes we don't. I actually will sometimes notice a little bit of a difference in my energy levels if I supplement with an NMN or an NADH supplement. I don't know if you ever noticed that, but it's it can be great for cellular energy. What are your thoughts on NADH or NMN and as a supplement?
Yeah, I definitely think it could be really helpful. I personally haven't noticed much of a difference taking it. I would say for me, like a good methylated high quality multivitamin, I feel it. Like when I'm taking it regularly, I just feel like I've got a little bit more energy. But I would say supplements are more 10%. They might give you a 10% bump, but
it's so
90% is the lifestyle, is getting your circadian rhythm under control. Getting out in nature, like you were talking about, eating the right foods, avoiding the bad foods, right? Having good mental and emotional health, right? These are the biggest factors. And then you can play around with the supplements. I would say probably the biggest one that I hear from people saying, this made a big difference for me. You mentioned vitamin D. That is a big one. I remember years ago when I was running my clinic, I had a lady come in, chronic pain, couldn't even touch her, and I was a chiropractor, so I couldn't even adjust her. All I did was give her vitamin D. She comes back in 3 days later. She's like, I have no pain. I feel great. And so her vitamin D level, she brought in her last lab work. She was at six, nanograms per milliliter, which really should be about 60, right? So really, really low. So I've seen vitamin D, and I've also seen magnesium.
Yeah.
A lot of people, anxiety, depression, chronic pain, trouble sleeping. We get them using magnesium and they're like, oh, I can finally think clearly. I can finally pay attention. I can sleep at night. So I've seen those be like the biggest symptomatic game changers for people.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that some of these other supplements, right? Like you were talking about omega-3s, NAD, right? All these types of things, they can certainly be beneficial as well.
Yeah. Magnesium was actually going to be the next one on my list. And as you pointed out, and it's actually, when you look at the statistics, it's one of the most, the vitamin D and magnesium are two of the top five in terms of deficiencies. I mean, people are chronically deficient in these nutrients. And so it's very, very important as well. And so, and then outside of the vitamins and minerals, I would say herbals. There's been a lot of herbals and other superfoods, and I'll go through these a little more quickly. But a lot of the adaptogens, we talked about reishi mushroom, dong quai for women, it's known as female ginseng. Very good for building blood, very good for energy. If a woman has low energy or is feeling fatigued or, of course, anemic, it's really great for that. For men, Panax ginseng is also very good. It helps increase testosterone in some studies as well. And then I would also say ashwagandha. That, of course, is Ayurvedic medicine, but that's really good for hypothyroidism and Hashimoto's. Schisandra berry is another one I like for immune longevity, for limiting senescent cells. Now, probably in terms of research across the globe, that has the most efficacy for longevity in terms of an herbal is going to be green tea. Green tea,
Yeah.
and particularly sencha or matcha, are very potent. They have something called EGCG, epigalactic catechin, this unique antioxidant catechin that has anti-cancer properties, longevity properties, cellular energy properties, supporting mitochondrial health. So there's a lot of benefits there of green matcha tea. If you're going to take one thing generally, green and matcha tea across the board has probably the most clinical research if we're pulling all the evidence out of Asia and the Middle East as well. And then just a few others here, I would say, that are known for longevity. Here's a unique one, royal jelly.
Mm.
This is what the queen bee lives off of in the hive. And if you can get a honey product that has royal jelly, propolis, bee pollen in it, I mean, it is really an incredible superfood. When you get honey, kind of like the nose to tail idea
Mm.
of for an animal, when you get sort of the every part of the honeycomb or what you're going to get from bees, that itself is a super powerful superfood. We know aparists or beekeepers have the longest lifespan of any
Mm.
profession. Actually, aparists are number one. Number two are tennis players. And after that, I want to say it's doctors are on the list, professors are on the list, oh, farmers, they're on the list as well. So in terms of the profession, but beekeepers have the longest lifespan of anybody. And so it's really, so again, I think that's a great thing to consider as well.
You know
And
what's interesting is that bee venom, so getting stung by a bee, actually is one of the best things for priming the immune system. It's very antiviral, anti-Lyme, right? So it's really interesting how actually getting outside, getting in nature, right? Being around different microbes, even having stressors like getting stung by a bee can actually really support your immune system.
I had a friend in Puerto Rico, and he had arthritis, major rheumatoid arthritis. He got a beehive. Like he actually started raising bees and started intentionally stinging himself in all of his different joints. His arthritis is 100% gone.
Wow.
And so there's actually a
Amazing.
therapy doing what you're talking about, where if you've got a
Yeah.
joint that's been damaged, it's sort of like, today people go get PRP or stem cell therapy. It's sort of the ancient form of doing that in the joint, but it has an even greater, probably natural immunomodulatory effect. So anyways, I love that you brought that up, Dr. Dave, because I do think that's a really powerful point in therapy that people could look into if they've got immune dysregulation, those type of issues. So I think it's brilliant. It's a great point. And so I would say from an herbal standpoint, doing the mushrooms, doing the adaptogenic herbs like the ashwagandha, like the ginseng, like the donquai, like the rhodiola rosea, those sort of compounds are really great for longevity. Turmeric for anti-inflammation and ginger, galangal, those sort of things. And as we mentioned there, I think the bee products, the royal jelly in particular, have a lot of longevity benefits that people should try and incorporate more of these in our diet. And when you look at our country compared to a lot of the others, when you look at the Western world, at least the United States, Europe, Australia, we don't use near as many spices and herbs as they do in places like Asia, the Middle East, India. And so we probably do need to be getting a lot more, and even like herbal tea, like drinking tea is not as much of a thing in the United States. But if you go to every single other
Mhm.
country in the world, drinking tea is how they actually got their supplements.
Yeah.
And so, I would say that that's something else to consider is, it's another way that you don't have to take supplements, get it in tea form.
Yeah, I love drinking herbal tea. I do it every single day. Just even the warm water. Not you already talked about the benefits of the herbs, but even just the warmth of the water, especially in the morning, activates the vagus nerve, stimulates peristalsis in your gut, helps you detox, clean. Great for the liver, right? So it helps with bile flow and helping your body detoxify, and it helps calm you. Just the warmth in general, and prepare you for the day. So a lot of great benefits there. Josh, we've talked about so much right here. A lot of nuggets for people. So I know people are got a lot of value out of it. Where can they find you? You've got a lot of great books. I know your most recent book that you wrote is Think This, Not That, but you've also got some other great books, Eat Dirt, Ancient Remedies, um, And looking forward to that future book as well on cellular longevity. And where's the best place other than, I know you got drax.com, people can find information there. Any other websites or
Yeah.
resources for people to go to?
Yeah, I'd say the top of the list is my podcast. It's the
Yeah,
Dr. Josh Ack Show. And you've been a guest on there, so you guys can
sure.
watch the
Yep.
interview I did with Dr. Dave there. It was a great one. And it's on YouTube, Spotify, Apple. And you could just search also my name, as I know people probably search your name. But you go to YouTube and search Dr. Josh Axe. And if you want to learn more about longevity, you could look up Dr. Axe longevity or Dr. Axe
Mm.
hypothyroidism or Dr. Axe whatever you're dealing with, and probably find a podcast or something I've done there or on information on YouTube. And then my social channels like Instagram's at
Mm.
Dr. Josh Axe there as well. But
Yeah,
Dave,
for
thanks so
sure.
much for
Josh is
having
a
me on.
great follow. Josh is a great follow on Instagram. Lots of really great information. So definitely Facebook, Instagram, look for Dr. Josh Axe.
Awesome. Thanks, Dr. Dave.
All right. Thank you guys so much. And we'll see y'all on a future interview. Be blessed, everybody.